portion of what happens next?
He is.
Have you reviewed that video, and do you have it?
I do, and I have.
Can you please describe the chronology of events after the McMichaels parked their vehicle in the middle of this public roadway as Mr. Arbery approached the back of that vehicle?
Yes, I can. Mr. Bryan picks up the phone, it's been videotaping the whole time, and holds it up so you have a view. You see Mr. Arbery running down Holmes Road, going towards Satilla Drive. You see Travis McMichael's truck is parked in the road. Travis McMichael, the driver's side door is open. Travis McMichael is there. It is apparent to me he is holding a firearm. His arm is raised in a pointed position. At one point, then Mr. Arbery is running. He then apparently sees what Travis McMichael in front of him. Then he changes direction to go around the passenger side of the vehicle.
Rather than going to the driver's side where you had seen Travis McMichael with the shotgun, he's now going to the opposite side of that truck that's parked in this public roadway.
That's correct. He's going around the truck.
What happened after that?
Travis McMichael then moves from the driver's side, where he's actually standing. When you open the driver's side door, the door is at his back initially in the video, and he's got the shotgun. He then positions himself around the driver's side door towards the front of the truck. You see Mr. Arbery running alongside the passenger side, and again you see Travis McMichael has repositioned himself along the front of the truck. Mr. Arbery then comes up to a position, sees Travis McMichael, then makes the decision and turns and decides to engage Travis McMichael.
What happens after that?
As he turns and goes toward Travis McMichael, you hear a shot. Then you see Travis McMichael moving backwards with Mr. Arbery. Obviously, they were engaged in a physical confrontation at this point. They go off the screen. You then hear a second shot where you see blood and spray into the screen, a mist of it. Then they come back in to the view of the camera. There, Mr. Arbery is striking Travis McMichael. There's a struggle going on, and then you see a third shot occur. The firearm being lowered down like that. You see that after the third shot, you can see Mr. Arbery get past Travis McMichael and continue running down Holmes, almost right there at the intersection, and then he falls.
You articulated 3 separate gunshots here, correct?
Yes.
Where was Greg McMichael at the time that this was going on?
Greg McMichael was in the back of the pickup truck. When the situation began, he was on the phone.
At this point, have they finally called 911?
They have, yes.
And was he armed at that time?
He was. As the confrontation began, he drops the phone or puts the phone down and then pulls his weapon. And he has his weapon during the parts of the confrontation occurred. When
you talk about his weapon, are you referring to the .357 revolver that you had articulated earlier during this hearing?
I am.
And of note, can you tell the court and make a record about any significance about that weapon, as even mentioned by Greg McMichael in terms of where he got it?
Yes, that was the same .686 Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum revolver that he carried when he was an officer with the Glynn County Police Department, and it's stamped Glynn County GCPD.
Did he articulate that he was a former law enforcement officer to Glynn County police officers when they arrived, and is that captured on body cam video?
It is. He said it several times.
And did he mention also several times that that was a gun that had been issued by Glynn County Police Department?
He did.
You mentioned 3 gunshot wounds in this particular case. Can you articulate for the court the benefit of our record where those gunshot wounds were to Mr. Arbery's body?
I can. Mr. Arbery suffered a gunshot wound to the center of the chest. He also suffered a gunshot wound to the upper left chest around the armpit area here. Again, from the front to the back. He then suffered a shotgun wound to his right wrist.
I want to talk about other things that were collected by Glynn County Police Department. And again, this was not your crime scene, and that you were asked to participate in this investigation later, correct?
That's correct.
You're aware, though, that certain items of evidence of significance were collected in this case by Glynn County Police Department?
I am, yes, sir.
How about the firearm?
Yes. Well, Travis McMichael's firearm was collected by the Glynn County Police Department.
And how many spent shell casings do we have from that shotgun?
3.
2 of them were expelled. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
What about the third one? Where did that remain?
It was still within the chamber of the weapon.
And give a description briefly for the benefit of the court and the record about what type of firearm that was used to shoot Mr. Arbery.
The 870 Remington 870 12-gauge shotgun is a pump action shotgun, meaning that once a shot is fired, the front forearm of the weapon has to be operated to eject the spent shell, and then the forearm has to be operated again to load a new live round in.
During Travis McMichael's interview with police, did he make any admissions about firing the fatal gunshots in this particular case?
He did. He admitted firing the weapon 3 times.
And the first shot that he articulated, where did he indicate to police that shot landed?
The chest, Mr. Arbery's chest.
So the first shot that Mr. Travis McMichael said that was inflicted on Mr. Arbery was one of the chest wounds that you'd articulated. You're correct?
That is correct.
And is there video evidence that you saw that tends to corroborate, based on your observation, that is an accurate statement that the chest wound was, or at least one of the chest wounds was the first shot that was fired at the deceased victim, Mr. Arbery?
Yes, sir, there is.
Can you articulate to the court how that is that you're able to see that?
After the first shot, again, you see a struggle between Travis McMichael and Mr. Arbery. During that struggle, Mr. Arbery, while he was wearing a white shirt during this incident, during that struggle, you see the front of his shirt is saturated with blood.
He's already saturated with blood before the struggle that you can see on the video.
Well, that's correct. During the struggle, it was mere seconds after the first shot. His front of his shirt is saturated with blood.
Okay. Because this is somewhat of a complicated situation, just doing it orally, do you think it would be a benefit to the court and this judge, who's the finder of fact, to use a map to sort of describe the sequence of events as we're able to piece it together based on interviews and video that you've reviewed?
I do, yes, sir.
Judge, we had brought to court today a map, and I know this is not the ideal setting in terms of use of technology, because we are having to utilize the technology for the benefit of the defendants who are observing remotely. The defense also brought a map, and I think we have a joint agreement that we will tender one of those maps as a blow-up map as a demonstrative aid so that we can use this to help articulate the sequence of events. Is that an accurate statement?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay.
We agree.
I don't know anything about it, but we'll go along.
So for our purposes today, I will tender this blow-up as a demonstrative aid as State's Exhibit number 1. We have a smaller version here in court that's very similar. And what I'll suggest to the court is that during a break, maybe we photograph or get a smaller digital photograph of this to make it part of our record. I understand that the defense might want to take this map with them when they leave, and the state has no objection to that, so long as we make a record about what the map looks like. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes, sir.
I agree.
Yes.
We will grant that.
So again, Judge, I know these are not the ideal circumstances, and we are truly appreciative of the court being accommodating to us as we try to navigate through this pandemic and the issues that we're facing here. But I think that during our test run, the best way we're able to do this will be the State's Exhibit number 1 that will send to the defense. If I situate this appropriately, I believe that everyone can see that on the video. Let's get confirmation by thumbs up or otherwise.
Jesse, can you turn it this way a little bit?
I can. Just trying to get the glare off of it.
Yeah. Glare.
Is that okay with you? I see glare on the corner, but otherwise, are you satisfied?
We're satisfied.
I'm going to hand you this pointer. If you please extend that, Agent John Dodd, and then I'm going to try to hold this. Describe what is depicted here for the benefit of Judge Harold.
This is the Satilla Shores neighborhood.
And then show generally the entrance into Satilla Shores that you talked about.
This is the entrance up here to Satilla Shores.
And you had talked generally about a house under construction. Let's talk about the locations that you talked about during your testimony before we go into the chronology a little bit more.
Certainly. Again, this is Tiller Drive that comes down. This would be approximately the residence that was under construction, and that would belong to Mr. Larry English. This is marked as 230 Satilla Drive. This is Greg and Travis McMichael's residence where they resided. Down Burford, it would be within this area here is William Bryan's residence along Burford.
And then what about Holmes Drive? Do you see that depicted here as well?
Yes, this is Tiller Drive here. This is Holmes Road. The intersection, the shooting incident took place about here.
Based on the chronology that you had just described to the court, please show where Mr. Arbery would have initially entered this neighborhood.
He would enter the neighborhood from up here, which is the entrance. Again, along Satilla Drive is where the house of construction is, and that's where you first see him. We have him on video. He's coming along Satilla Drive in this direction, coming into the house.
Will you make sure that you speak up really loudly since our court reporters now facing your back? And I trust you'll give me an indication if you can. Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Yes, this is still a drive when you're coming from the front. If you'll come here, this is the house under construction. We have video of Mr. Arbery as he's coming in this direction down Still Drive when he enters into the home that's under construction.
I don't think we've explicitly covered times yet, but was this broad daylight?
It was, yes. It was approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
It was afternoon.
Yes.
And what about weather conditions? Sunny?
Sunny, clear, yes.
Describe now the chronology based on the statements that you all have of the defendants and the video that you pieced together of where Ahmaud Arbery initially traveled and what transpired involving the 2 pickup trucks.
Certainly. So, again, Mr. Arbery is inside the house that's under construction. The neighbor comes out, sees him. He is standing approximately here. He's the one that calls 911.
Police are on their way.
Yes, sir. Police are on their way.
Let me ask you this. Did any police officers actually respond in such haste that they were able to hear anything?
Yes, sir. The first responding officer, again, he is coming back down here. He then hears the gunshots, and he knows that in his body cam footage.
Not to keep interrupting you, but if you will describe the path of travel of Mr. Arbery per statements and video.
Certainly. Again, Mr. Arbery comes out of the residence under construction, then heads south along Satilla Drive. You see him on the video as he comes in this direction. This, again, is Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael's house. Greg McMichael's statement is that he goes in and tells Travis. They then grab their weapons. On the video, you see Travis, what appears to be Travis McMichael's truck, come out of 230 Satilla Drive and go in this direction in pursuit of Mr. Arbery. According to their statements, Mr. Arbery then comes down Satilla Drive. He then goes onto Burford Road. Again, he comes by Mr. Bryan's house, which will be in this area here. There's video. He's going back and forth by Travis McMichael's truck at this point. Then, according to statements, Mr. Arbery goes down Buford. Travis McMichael is pursuing him down Buford. That's before they get to the turn here. Mr. Arbery turns back and goes back north along Buford. This is when Greg McMichael gets out of his vehicle. In the meantime, Mr. Bryan has decided to go in pursuit himself. He has entered his truck. He sees Mr. Arbery coming down Buford. He pulls out on the roadway and attempts to block him in and stop him. Mr. Arbery goes around his truck. At this point, Mr. Bryan is in pursuit of Mr. Arbery, trying to stop him, trying to detain him. Travis McMichael has made the decision to, instead of going back this way, to go around Buford when it turns into Zellwood here, and to come back along all the way up Zellwood and turn down Holmes Road. Mr. Travis McMichael's statement is to try to cut Mr. Arbery off.
I want to pause and ask you some questions of what you just articulated for the court. There was a point in time, at least one, where Mr. Arbery's path of travel was redirected, correct?
Yes, sir.
And was it redirected in such a manner that had he continued straight, he would have been able to leave the Satilla Shores neighborhood?
Yes, sir.
And was Mr. Arbery ever able to leave this neighborhood based on the evidence that you have?
No, sir. He was killed before he exited the neighborhood.
you talked, based on my questioning, on direct about the two vehicles, the two pickup trucks in this neighborhood, separating at one point. Describe in more detail the path of travel of both of the trucks after they separated, essentially.
Certainly. Mr. Bryan, again, is headed generally north on Buford back towards Satilla Drive in pursuit of Mr. Arbery, because that's the direction Mr. Arbery is going at this point, is back towards Satilla Drive, which is the way he has come into the neighborhood, and he's going back the way he came. Of course, Travis McMichael, as I said, he is at this point on Buford, instead of going back in pursuit, he decides to loop around according to his statement and try to cut off Mr. Arbery by going down Holmes Road.
Was Mr. Arbery redirected by Mr. Bryan's vehicle such that he could not make it straight out of the exit of this particular neighborhood?
That's correct. Again, Mr. Bryan has stated that he tried to stop and detain Mr. Arbery several times. At one point, actually, Mr. Bryan goes on Satilla Drive. Mr. Arbery, being pursued by Mr. Bryan, turns down Holmes Road quickly to the point where Mr. Bryan has to turn around and then go down Holmes Road. So he's pursuing. Mr. Arbery's going down Holmes Road towards Zellwood. Mr. Bryan is coming behind Mr. Arbery on Holmes Road towards Zellwood, while Travis McMichael is turning off of Zellwood onto Holmes Road, coming back towards Mr. Arbery.
Is this the point that you just articulated for the court earlier this morning, that the two vehicles were essentially facing each other, almost pinning Ahmaud Arbery in between the two?
That's correct, yes.
And describe, if you will, what happened next based on the video and the statements that you have that were obtained as part of this investigation.
Yes. On Holmes Road, according to the video and the statements, Mr. Arbery turns and goes back towards Mr. Bryan. We do not know from the investigation at this point whether he saw Mr. McMichael's truck at this point, but that's a reasonable conclusion at this point. But he turns around, goes back towards Mr. Bryan, goes around Mr. Bryan's truck. Mr. Bryan then pulls off the road because Mr. Travis McMichael's truck is coming back towards Mr. Arbery. And Mr. Bryan then, after Travis McMichael's truck passes, gets back on Holmes Road and proceeds back towards the intersection of Holmes Road and Still Drive in pursuit of Mr. Arbery and Travis McMichael's truck.
Is this the point in time where both the vehicles are essentially facing the same direction?
It is, yes.
And this roadway, obviously we're just looking at a map here. You've been to it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it a wide roadway or is it fairly narrow?
It's fairly narrow, yes.
Why don't you describe, first of all, had Mr. Arbery been able to make it to the intersection here of Holmes and I guess that's Satilla, had he made a right there, had he been able to make a right, where would he have been able to go?
He would have gone up Satilla Drive and out of the neighborhood.
And what's across from this neighborhood that you've given some testimony about before?
There's Highway 17 is here, and across Highway 17 is the entrance into Mr. Arbery's neighborhood. It goes back into where he lives.
His neighborhood's right across the highway?
Yes.
All right. Now, we pick up here with some of the video that you've observed that Mr. Bryan took, correct?
Yes.
Describe where generally the sequence of events occurred in terms of the fatal shooting of Mr. Arbery on Holmes Drive.
So, Travis McMichael at some point has gotten in front of Mr. Arbery. He actually stops right about here near the intersection of Holmes Road and Satilla Drive. That's where he stops his vehicle. It is facing towards the intersection of Satilla Drive with the rear of the vehicle facing back down Holmes Road. Mr. Bryan, from the video, is coming down Holmes Road. Mr. Arbery is between the two trucks.
He's trapped in between the two?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Bryan, then you see there's a slight curve in the vehicle, which would be approximately this curve here. Mr. Arbery is coming towards Mr. McMichael's truck. Mr. McMichael is outside of the driver's side of the truck, armed with a shotgun at this point. Mr. Arbery then comes, sees Mr. McMichael, changes, and goes around the passenger side of the vehicle, not towards Travis McMichael, but around it. And then Travis McMichael changes his position to the front of the vehicle, and at that point is when Mr. Arbery sees Travis McMichael change position in front of the vehicle and then engages Mr. McMichael.
That's where the shooting took place?
Yeah, the first shot, yes, sir. After the first shot, then, because Travis McMichael doesn't back up during the first shot. After the first shot, there's a physical confrontation. You see Travis McMichael backing up. There is a physical altercation at this point. You see that you hear the second shot is off camera as well, but you do see the blood mist into the camera screen. Then you see then both Travis McMichael and Mr. Arbery are fighting. They come back into the view of the screen, did you see the third shot?
But this is all, the altercation you talk about is all after that first shot to the chest that Travis McMichael made an admission about.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And for the benefit of our record, I thought I heard this, and I know it's a minor error, but I want to make sure we're making the record. I think you said curb or bend of the vehicle. You meant bend of the road.
Road. I meant the road. Yes, sir.
Yes,
I
sir.
apologize.
I just wanted to make sure that we're accurate on,
Yes,
on
sir.
that point. All right. Thank you, sir. I'm going to set this here, and I'm going to let you hold that. There's any cross that you might need it for. During the investigation of this case, you're aware of the cause and manner of death as determined by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Medical Examiner's Office, correct?
I am.
And can you please articulate for the benefit of the court and our record cause and manner of death?
The cause was gunshot wound, manner was homicide.
I want to talk about statements of the defendants. There were statements of all three defendants that were given to a number of investigators in the case, including Glynn County Police Department.
That's correct.
First, focusing on Greg McMichael's statement, was there any body cam video obtained showing statements that he made to responding officers?
There was, yes, sir.
And just summarize any admissions or statements that he made to Glynn County police officers.
Greg McMichael pretty much relates on the body cam footage, and then later on, whenever he actually is interviewed on camera by the Glynn County Police Department, he makes admissions to seeing Mr. Arbery running down the roadway. His statement to the effect is he didn't know Mr. Arbery had stolen anything or not, but he had a gut feeling that Mr. Arbery may have been responsible for thefts that were in the neighborhood previously. And he actually says gut. His instinct told him that. He then tells Travis McMichael. He then describes the pursuit of Mr. Arbery. He says that during Greg McMichael's statement, he only hears 2 shots during his statement. It appears by looking at his description of events that he either didn't realize the first shot or didn't register it. He was admits to being on the phone with 911 when the shooting was occurring on his weapon.
Did he make any admissions to you about Mr. Bryan at some point volunteering to join into this chase of Mr. Arbery in the neighborhood, and how did he describe that?
Yeah, he described that Mr. Bryan was trying to block him in as well.
Okay. And at the point of the actual shooting itself, did Mr. Greg McMichael make any admissions to Glynn County investigators about any statements that he was making to Travis McMichael about what he sure shouldn't do?
Yes. He says on the body camera footage, the first officer, he tells him that he was telling Travis McMichael, don't shoot.
Despite that, do you have video footage showing that essentially Greg McMichael is covering Travis with a .357?
I do, yes, sir.
And what did Greg McMichael say about Travis's shooting of the victim in terms of where he shot him specifically on his body?
Chest.
Okay. Similarly, was there video footage, both body cam and also interview footage of Travis McMichael and his assertions about what happened on this date?
Yes, Travis McMichael's particularly interview was done at the Glynn County Police Department with him. He went into detail.
Did Travis McMichael make any admissions about ordering the victim at gunpoint to try to get on the ground or anything like that?
Yes, he did.
Prior to the shooting?
Prior to the shooting, yes, sir.
And what about any admissions that were made about the fatal shooting itself?
He admits to firing his shotgun 3 times. He says that all 3 shots struck the victim, and he said that the first shot was to the chest of the victim.
Prior to that, had Mr. Travis McMichael made any admissions about choosing to chase the victim with his pickup truck you described?
Yes.
He was the driver of that truck?
He was the driver of the truck.
I now want to turn your attention to Mr. Roddie Bryan. And are you aware of any admissions that he made both to Glynn County Police Department as well as investigators with the Georgia Bureau of Investigations about his role in this particular crime that led to the arrest warrants you obtained?
Yes, sir, I am.
Can you describe generally for the court some of the specific admissions that were made by Mr. Bryan?
Mr. Bryan admits to joining the pursuit of Mr. Arbery. He admits to trying to block Mr. Arbery in, trying to detain him several times, both before Mr. Arbery turned on Holmes Road and then while on Holmes Road.
Did he make any admissions to using his vehicle to redirect the victim within the Satilla Shores neighborhood prior to the fatal shooting?
Yes, he did.
And did he talk about the victim doubling back and trying to get away from this vehicle?
He did, yes, several times.
Did he confirm for you that the video you've now seen and collected was made by him on his cell phone?
He did.
All right, so you're listening to Agent Richard Dial from the GBI accounting for what happened that day. I want to bring in Law&Crime's Terry Austin. This is interesting. More details. We didn't know before, at least I didn't know before, that William Bryan had tried to detain Arbery and his vehicle made contact with Arbery. This was a really big development because it makes him even more of a key player in what happened. But from my sense, I don't think there was pre-coordination between the McMichaels and Bryan. It seemed like he didn't know what was going on, and he maybe stupidly just jumped in to try to help, even though there was nothing to help with.
I agree, Jesse. From what I've heard so far, it sounds like Bryan saw this commotion. He saw the McMichaels truck. He knows at least the father, and he recognized the truck. He just hops in his truck and he starts chasing. And, you know, I think he thinks he's trying to help. And it does sound like, and what we saw from the 4-minute video, it does seem as though Bryan was really following Arbery. He was following the truck. And he was clearly part and parcel of this chase. And if, in fact, he hit Arbery, then clearly he is, you know, part of this crime. And he definitely cornered him. So, yes, this is interesting.
What's clear is these defendants literally trapped Arbery, redirected his path of escape. There were multiple times they could have called 911. There were times that Arbery literally tried to get out of harm's way, and they stopped him. And at this point, it'll be very interesting for the defense to, or hear what they're going to say, that Arbery was a threat of some kind. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we plan to jump live. Stay tuned.
We have, yes, sir.
Regarding the jail recordings and also about conversations between the defendants prior to the arrest. Was there a delay before you were involved in the case and able to secure the arrest warrants that are the subject of this preliminary hearing?
There was, yes, sir.
Have you had an opportunity to review whether there's any evidence that the defendants communicated with each other after the fatal shooting but prior to the arrest warrants in this case?
Yes, sir, I have.
And tell the court what you found about that, since we're talking about party to the crime and conspiracy culpability in just a few minutes.
Yes, we have uncovered evidence through statements that Greg McMichael had conversation with Mr. Bryan concerning the video and the incident.
Okay. And specifically, have you acquired a jail call where any of the McMichaels refer to Mr. Bryan in a favorable way?
I have. During a jail call that my agency obtained and reviewed, Greg McMichael was on the phone with a caller. The caller asked him about Mr. Bryan. At first, Mr. McMichael says he can't talk about it, and then he says that Mr. Bryan is an ally.
He uses the term ally referencing his co-defendant, Mr. Bryan.
He does.
This is after the McMichael's arrest, but prior to Mr. Bryan's arrest?
And that's correct.
Just a moment. I think that's all I have at this time, Judge.
All right. Have the defendants made a decision about the order of cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you read it?
I will begin
All right.
on behalf of Travis.
Would you proceed to cross-examine?
Judge, if we can take a brief recess, I do need to speak with
All right.
my client, and I need to talk about the
We'll take a 15-minute break.
Thank you, Judge.
All rise. Me, ladies.
And welcome back, everybody. We just learned that they took a break in the preliminary hearing in the Ahmaud Arbery case. As we know, the McMichaels and Bryan have been charged with murder in connection with the death of Ahmaud Arbery. And we are learning more details, specifically from the GBI, of what happened that day. I want to bring back in Terry Austin. Terry, as we talked about before the last break, we're learning more about the role of William Bryan, the man who claimed he was just an innocent witness. And yet, as we're learning from the GBI's account, he was an active participant in blocking Arbery's escape, even tried to detain him. So if you're the defense attorney here, Kevin Guff, who went on CNN and said that his client was just an innocent party, what are you saying exactly? Because that doesn't seem to be accurate with what the GBI's account is. Now, again, we're going to hear from the defense. We're going to hear from their witnesses. But that is a big claim to make on national television, what we're hearing from the GBI.
You know, it's interesting, Jesse, that you asked me that question. I have some background on public relations, and it is very important, particularly for defense attorneys, to be careful what they say in the public. You don't know what the prosecution has, and you want to make sure that there aren't inconsistencies. And I think when defense counsel went on the record outside of the courthouse and said in public that his client is innocent, that he wasn't involved, it was going too far. And in fact, I think it is going to hurt them now when they're trying to defend this case because there's so many inconsistencies.
Yeah, I mean, what are you expecting for today? We expect a longer hearing, multiple witnesses. We've talked about this kind of being a trial before the trial. It's all to determine if there's enough evidence to proceed towards trial. You tell me, do you think that this case is going to move forward for all?
I do, Jesse. I think it's going to move forward for all four defendants. I think that, you know, we have, or rather all three defendants, we have Gregory McMichael, we have Travis McMichael, and we have William Bryan. And I do think there's enough evidence for all of them because clearly the son shot Arbery. The father also was involved, and I think it's being very clear now that Bryan was involved with this chase, with cornering in Arbery, and in fact, if he actually hit Arbery at one point, I think that they are all three involved. I think they'll be able to make sure they have charges and evidence against all three of them, and you know, we'll have to see what happens at trial. But I think they have enough to proceed here with the evidence so far.
And Terry, you know what's also interesting? It's what we knew about before this hearing, but I guess it was articulated maybe even more clearly, is that the gunshots the gunshots were fired by Travis McMichael, and there was a pause. There is a pause with the shotgun. And it's not as if you fire 3 shots automatically. That pause and in the shots seems to indicate, from a legal sense, you could have fired 1 shot, but firing multiple, you should have just fired 1 when you thought there was a danger, but multiple seems more like murder. Your thoughts on multiple shots being fired here?
Yes, I agree. I think the fact that you have all of these shots, the fact that obviously Travis knew when he shot the first shot that Arbery was hit. I mean, this is a rifle. This is a huge gun, and it causes significant damage, and that would have been enough to stop Arbery if, in fact, Arbery was in the middle of a crime and running away from the scene. And the fact that he ends up shooting multiple times, I think it shows his intent here was definitely beyond just stopping Arbery. He was intending here to cause serious bodily injury, to either, kill him. I don't think at that point in time, based on what we've seen so far, that he was just trying to defend himself. At that point in time, when we see the multiple shots, it does imply that he's doing more than just injuring Arbery. He's trying to take him out.
I still can't get over the relationship between Bryan and the McMichaels. We learned that Bryan didn't know Travis McMichael. He knew Gregory McMichael, but didn't even recognize him that day. So there was no pre-planning based upon the GBI's account. There was nothing, we're going to do this together. We planned it out. But I believe we just heard before the break that they called him an ally. They called Bryan an ally. Now, did he really know what was going on? Because Kevin Guff, his attorney, went on national television and basically said his client is an idiot. Is that what happened here? You have a guy who moronically thought that there was something that he needed to get involved in, and that's what happened, that he wasn't a part of this. He didn't have an evil intent, but yet his intent was to jump in, thought there was a danger, tried to detain Arbery, tried to block him in, even though he really didn't know what was going on.
Well, one thing we can say for sure, Jesse, is that he is hot-headed. Bryan is seeing something going on. He sees this commotion. He sees Arbery running down the street, and he knows the father. He knows the elder person. They're at the same age, 54, 50. So, he knows him, and he recognized the truck. He doesn't know Travis, but he's trying to, at least based on it seems what his statement said, he's trying to help. He sees this commotion, and he calls out. He doesn't exactly recognize who's in the truck, but he's going to help. And I do think it is, I don't want to say moronic, but the fact that he doesn't know what's going on, really the very first thing he should have done was to call 911, wait for the police to arrive instead of getting involved. And now we see, because he got so involved without knowing what was going on, he too now is being charged with, felony murder. So I do think his attorney is wrong to call him moronic, but he certainly did not stop and think about how he should respond to this.
That, the other part about it too is we learned, we heard more about the videos, the construction site, Larry English's property, where the McMichaels thought Arbery was robbing or burglarizing or going in there, when really the videotape showed that Arbery's just one of several people that would go onto this unsecured property. The idea here as well plays a pivotal role in what happened here, because I guess they had a misunderstanding. As we learned from the GBI, they said that the morning of, Arbery went into that property. Someone calls 911. It's at that point, Arbery leaves. He goes running, and the McMichaels get their guns, jump in the truck, and take pursuit because of everything that had been happening over the last, I guess, several days or several weeks, where they thought people were entering the property, but they only chased Arbery. They didn't chase anybody.
I agree, Jesse. I mean, you have so many people going in and out of that house. And as you know, it's unsecured. You heard the owner himself say that he had no problem with people coming in and out. And you do have to wonder to yourself why the McMichaels, why Bryan did not chase other people. They did not think that other people were trying to steal. And in fact, when you look at the video, Arbery wasn't trying to steal anything. He stopped, he took a break, he looked around, he was curious, he drank some water. And so there was no reason for them to think that Arbery and not the others were trying to commit a crime. So I do think race had something to do with it. And I do think that what they did was obviously excessive. And now we have the death of an innocent young man.
Both sides. Let's take a quick break. When back, live. Okay. Uh, uh, I don't know how to where to plug them into because I'm using this, and this is this is the one that, yeah, I don't know what to do. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Do I do I do I have time to do this, guys? Does that sound better? Yeah, does that sound better? Yeah. Does that sound better? Does 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 this sound okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Sure. I'll fix it after. Yeah. Okay. And welcome back, everybody. So we're waiting to jump live once again into the preliminary hearing for the McMichaels and William Bryan in the Ahmaud Arbery shooting out of Georgia. What a day where we're learning about more of what the GBI has, the evidence they have against these three defendants. And it is something. The account really targets these three people and says, hey, they tried to block the way of Arbery, redirected his path, made sure he couldn't escape, and then ultimately they gunned him down. Now, we're going to hear more witnesses today. We'll hear the defense's argument. Let's start right now from the video itself of the shooting. If you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it, I'll warn you once again, this is graphic. All right, so I guess I'm back here with we're back here with Terry Austin. Terry, you still with us?
I am with you, Jesse.
Okay, Terry, so the video evidence is crucial here. The one thing that I don't understand, and maybe we're going to get more of an answer here, is how did Gregory McMichael, how did he get the video? Because we've learned evidence that he was the one who helped put the video forward. And if Bryan had the video, there had to be some coordination between the time of the shooting and between the release of the video, remember, they weren't arrested initially. What do you think that relationship is?
You know, we'll find out definitely when this comes to trial how that transfer was made. But here's my theory. I think they know each other. And I think that when, you know, Gregory McMichael saw that Bryan was behind him, that he was recording everything, he probably thought that the video would help him and help his son Travis, that it would show that it was self-defense, because Arbery looked as though he was trying to take the gun away. So I think what actually happened is that Gregory McMichael said to William Bryan, look, I know you were taking a video. Let me have that. And then, you know, it will show that my son was defending himself. I think what he didn't recognize is there's a longer video. And then the statements that were made also, the fact that Bryan basically says, yeah, I'm chasing him down. So I thought that, you know, Gregory McMichael really was trying to protect himself when in fact it went against him.
Yeah, I want to go a little bit more, in case you're just joining us, to what we heard during the preliminary hearing. We heard from Agent Dial from the GBI talking about the account of that day. What does the evidence show? Let's take a listen.
It was Mr. Arbery running back down Holmes towards the drive, Travis McMichael driving his truck directly behind Mr. Arbery, and then there was Mr. Bryan behind Travis McMichael's truck. At some point, Travis McMichael's truck gets ahead of Mr. Arbery.
What happens when the McMichael's truck gets ahead of the victim?
Their vehicle gets ahead of Mr. Arbery, then they stop their vehicle, and this is almost at the intersection of Satilla Drive and Holmes Road. They stop.
Is this a public roadway?
It is.
Where is Mr. Bryan's vehicle located during this portion of the chase?
Mr. Bryan's vehicle is behind Mr. Arbery. Mr. Arbery at this point is between Travis McMichael's vehicle and Mr. Bryan's vehicle.
Is Mr. Bryan able to video any portion of what happens next?
He is.
Have you reviewed that video, and do you have it?
I do, and I have.
Can you please describe the chronology of events after the McMichaels parked their vehicle in the middle of this public roadway as Mr. Arbery approached the back of that vehicle?
Yes, I can. Mr. Bryan picks up the phone that's been videotaping the whole time and holds it up so you have a view. You see Mr. Arbery running down Holmes Road going towards Satilla Drive. You see Travis McMichael's truck is parked in the road. Travis McMichael, the driver's side door is open. Travis McMichael is there. It is apparent to me he is holding a firearm. His arm is raised. It's in a pointed position. At one point, then Mr. Arbery is running. He then apparently sees what Travis McMichael in front of him. Then he changes direction to go around the passenger side of the vehicle.
Rather than going to the driver's side where you had seen Travis McMichael with a shotgun, he's now going to the opposite side of that truck that's parked in this public roadway.
That's correct. He's going around the truck.
What happened after that?
Travis McMichael then moved from the driver's side, where he's actually standing. When you open a driver's side door, the door is at his back initially in the video, and he's got the shotgun. He then positions himself around the driver's side door towards the front of the truck. You see Mr. Arbery running alongside the passenger side, and again you see Travis McMichael has repositioned himself along the front of the truck. Mr. Arbery then comes up to a position, sees Travis McMichael, then makes a decision and turns and decides to engage Travis McMichael.
What happens after that?
As he turns and goes towards Travis McMichael, you hear a shot. Then you see Travis McMichael moving backwards with Mr. Arbery. Obviously, they were engaged in a physical confrontation at this point. They go off the screen. You then hear a second shot where you see blood and spray into the screen, a mist of it. Then they come back in to the view of the camera. There, Mr. Arbery is striking Travis McMichael. There's a struggle going on, and then you see a third shot occur. The firearm being lowered down like that. When you see after the third shot, you then see Mr. Arbery get past Travis McMichael and continue running down Holmes, almost right there at the intersection, and then he falls.
All right, I'm here with Bryan Buckmeyer as well. Bryan, great to have you on. This is the first time we're really hearing this evidence articulated in a way and really put together. What does the GBI have? What do you make of their account of what happened that day?
Hey, Jesse, I think that their account really shows what we've all been seeing in these videos. It's a breakdown step by step. And of course, they have the technology and the ability to zoom in. When I saw the shots, I didn't see the spray of blood come out because, of course, I'm looking through my iPhone or through my laptop. But they're really being able to break down step by step. And what I think many of us obviously saw the first time, that this was a murder. Why it wasn't for 2 months before the GBI got involved, I'm still scratching my head.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, Bryan. I want to ask you a follow-up question about that. It was addressed very briefly today. So you have Agent Dial who comes on, and he's asked, well, how did the GBI get involved? Oh, we weren't there initially. It was first investigated by the local Glynn County. There were some recusals, and then we jumped on. Isn't that something that needs to be examined a little bit more? Maybe it's not today, but at some point, doesn't that have to be examined more?
I mean, Jesse, I would argue it has to happen today, because if it doesn't happen today, then are we going to wait till the end of the trial for another Ahmaud Arbery? Are we going to wait till the end of hearings for another Ahmaud Arbery? I mean, we're seeing this play out in city after city, that the relationship between district attorneys' offices and police departments needs to be reevaluated. There needs to be some sort of oversight of those two entities. Otherwise, we're going to keep having this occur over and over and over again.
Terry, you have to explain this to me. Look, by law, an attorney has to advocate for their client, and it makes sense that they've wanted this preliminary hearing and they want to get this presented evidence on their behalf, saying that this shouldn't proceed to trial. The likelihood of that actually happening, I mean, what could they present today that would give the judge pause to say, maybe the state doesn't have enough yet to proceed to trial? Is there anything we should be looking out for today, Terry?
Look, I think based on what we know, based on the video, there is plenty to proceed at trial. And I think even if there's any question that there should be a trial so that we can determine what the evidence shows. What I'm really interested in, Jesse, is the statements that were made by all of these defendants at the time that all of this was occurring. It does seem that some of these statements imply and indicate that they were wrong, that they were chasing down Arbery, that they falsely imprisoned him, that they cornered him, and indeed that they shot him to death. And I think it has to go to trial because the jury has to understand what happened to Arbery. I mean, I agree with Bryan 100%. Has to be an overhaul, and it has to be oversight to what's going on between police and prosecution right now. So if this doesn't go to trial, I think we're going to have really more unrest than we're currently having. And what I was going to say about Arbery is he's being chased down like an animal. Yes, he comes and he tries to take that gun out of the hand of Travis McMichael because he thinks he's going to be shot and killed because they've been following him. So the jury has to see this, and we have to have a trial, and we owe it to the public to have a trial for this case.
Terry, to add to that point, they redirected his path. He could have escaped the neighborhood, and yet they redirected. He was blocked on both sides. There was one point when the McMichaels go in front of him and William Bryan is behind him. We learned today that Bryan tried to detain him himself. And so let's just go back to when Agent Dial explained how did this happen. So we know that there were videotapes of Arbery as well as other people going on to the Larry English's property, which was unsecured. It was a property in the middle of construction. On the day in question, you'll hear Agent Dial explain how this happened. Watch.
All right, I now want to direct your attention to specifically February the 23rd of 2020. The date that is the subject of your arrest warrants for the three defendants in this case. Were you able, looking at all of the evidence and speaking to all of the witnesses, to piece together a chronology of how Ahmaud Arbery came to be shot at Satilla Shores?
Yes, sir, I have.
Would you briefly and succinctly articulate for the court what it is that you were able to piece together from your investigation in this case?
Certainly. From the surveillance video across the street from the house that's under construction, you see Mr. Arbery coming up to the house, going directly into the house. From the interior video of the house, you see him just wandering around, again, not taking anything. He's just walking around, looking around inside under construction building. The neighbor across the street, Mr. Albanez, you can see him on the video coming forward, and during interviews with him, he saw Mr. Arbery going in the house, so he calls 911. At that point, the call is dispatched, and during the call, it's actually logged as somebody's in an open construction site. So Mr. Albanez sees him in there. From the video, you can tell that Mr. Arbery comes out of the residence and goes running down the street. From the interviews conducted by Glynn County PD, and you can actually see it on the video, Mr. Greg McMichael was in his front yard. You don't see him, but you see he says he's in his front yard working on some cushions for his boat. When he sees Mr. Arbery running down the street, during his interview with Glynn County PD, he doesn't say, he says that he didn't know if Arbery was chasing somebody or somebody was chasing him, but he recognized Arbery from previous video he had seen from February 11th as somebody that was inside this house that's under construction.
All right, Bryan, over to you. So as you just heard, the McMichaels thought, oh, well, we recognized Arbery from those videos. We didn't know if he was chasing somebody. We decided to pursue him. Didn't call 911. Multiple opportunities to call 911. Travis McMichael, it was only 2 weeks before, called 911 when he thought there was somebody breaking into the house. Didn't call 911 today or on that day. Your thoughts on that account?
So my thoughts are this, Jesse. There are a few missteps, and I think it comes from how this case started to be prosecuted. I do this in court all the time. It's actually somewhat fun, but also I think very poignant. When you get cases where you're saying that someone says, well, they match a description, and you don't ask the very pivotal questions of, well, what do you mean by the description? What was it entail? Because I then get to be as a defense attorney, like, do you mean 6'4", black, 210 pounds? And when the officer says yes, I get to point and say, well, that's me. That's the court officer. That's the judge. That's my client. So if you're basing it based on that information, that's a very weak description for you to go and commit this act. And I think those very strong questions should have been asked of Gregory McMichael, and that would have helped in this prosecution. But there's another failure there.
Well, Terry, we have to imagine that the police have to be responsible as well, in the sense that we know there was evidence that an officer had told Larry English, if you have trouble on your property, call Greg McMichael.
Yes, and I think that whole scenario, setting up, anybody who comes into the property, particularly, obviously, Arbery, you have to think what's going on, even with the whole community. If English, the landowner, didn't have a problem with people coming in, it's an unsecured property. It's in the middle of being built. I think there was some evidence or reports that said he wasn't going to complete the building of it. If he has no problem with it, then why are neighbors calling him saying, listen, if you want someone to watch a property or you want to follow up with this, former police officer or whatever his, original profession was, I think it's going too far. I think it's just, it's setting it up for something like this to happen.
Well, we are learning more about Mr. Arbery. We're learning more about the defendants today, and we're waiting to jump back live in that preliminary hearing. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll analyze more of what we saw this morning. Stay tuned.